Alrighty, welcome, peace and bliss, peace and bliss. I have to tell you this. Welcome, my beautiful brothers and sisters, to another beautiful episode of Ascension Time. I am your host, Enki Wiseone, and I am happy, extremely happy for this episode that we are shooting today. And that episode is titled Masculine and Feminine in Business. Masculine and feminine in business. And so we're going to be diving into, the different components of the masculine and feminine energies, and how that dynamic, goes and ties into the way that we have business. I have my beautiful, beautiful, beautiful guest on our show today, Miss Miss Jenny Affin, who is actually the one who brought up this topic to be discussed today. So I wanted to invite her onto our show so that we can, dive into it and be raw and authentic with really, understanding what it means to have a balanced dynamic when it comes to business. So please, all of my followers, all of my fans who listen to my podcast every week, please send an energetic warm welcome to our guest, Jenny.
Thank you so much, Inky, for that lovely introduction. Like you said, this was something that I wanted to bring forth to you a few weeks ago, and we had a phone call actually where we caught up, and it became clear to me in a lot of our conversations with each other, especially when we get in person with each other, we talk about business, and it's so expansive for me because in a lot of ways I see myself in you, and I think you see yourself in me. And to see a vessel as yourself doing business and then vice versa with me has been such a great learning process. And this topic of masculine and feminine within business is just not talked about enough or at all.
I agree. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so happy to have this conversation today, because I feel like we're really going to dive into it. I don't know about you, but I'm in a very, very open space to be transparent with how my journey has been when it comes to business. And then also, even a little bit before this live, I started really seeing a lot of the trends when it comes to masculine and feminine, as far as like why, for example, why females up to a certain point were not allowed to be in business. I just had a huge download that hit me, right before the live started. I was like, oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense at that time, why it's been that way up until this time. So yeah, what was the reason why you wanted to really dive in this? Why did this come up for you, that made you want to actually start this session?
I would definitely say it really was rooted in starting my own business with my business partner, Chelsea, who is also a female, forward, feminine, dominant energy person. But we do have masculine traits as well. But her and I started this business together. And in doing so, in our partnership contract, we wanted to, which we did, we included a section in it about the masculine and the feminine and which traits we wanted to integrate into the business.
So this is before you even started the business, before you guys got serious about the business, you guys pretty much identified the masculine and feminine traits within yourself, and then decided what you were going to put into this baby, AKA business.
Exactly. And it became super clear to us that it was really important because we work in the food business that's mainly male dominated. The type of food we make is bone broth, and like the actual the physicality of it is very masculine. So we're already entering this space as females, carrying big ass pots, like using our muscles, doing this whole process that's very masculine. And then we, give this to the people. And we've had so many experiences, especially at farmers markets, where men come up to us and can't even fathom that we created this business.
Interesting.
Like
So,
one, my favorite one was this man came and he was like, "Oh, is this a high school project for you
wow. And it's so crazy because the level of sexism is like beyond baffling. It's like it's a subconscious sexism programming that we don't even recognize like happening before our very eyes. And
guys?"
this is one of the things that I even like someone who likes to believe is I'm completely embodying my feminine energy as well as my masculine. There are times where I recognize that I'm being sexist, and it's like such a deep programming as far as like how I perceive certain things. Like, you know, it's like, I don't know how to actually put it into words just yet, but it's like I'm finding myself, or I'm finding that there's almost this voice in my head that has a hard time listening to the feminine when it comes to business. It's
Mhm.
like there's a voice that I have to like manually turn down, in my own growth process to say, no, this part needs to be really heard, even if it's not very understood right now. And so
Mhm.
that's what I kind of recognize, like, you know, it's almost like this is kind of what I was talking about in the very beginning about how this got started, how this came to be, where it's like we're in this society where it's mostly masculine driven business, and the feminine energy for a long time was assumed couldn't do business,
Right.
or they just have to keep quiet or they have to take care of the household or take care of everything else that's not business, and
Money related.
yeah, no, absolutely. It's directly devoted towards like how we choose to disperse the energy within our lives. So
Mhm.
it's like up until this point, it's almost like women weren't trusted with the masculine money energy for whatever reason,
Right.
and now it's like we're seeing, and I say now as in like this season of life existing, the past two decades, we've been seeing women come out of this cave and really step into their empowerment and actually like take business on to a whole new level.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. It's so true. And um, it reminds me too, just back to that the business partner agreement, because I think the a business partner agreement itself is a very masculine thing, right? Like
Mm,
that's to lay out all of the agreements. It's a binding contract. It's very, very cut and dry. And when I approached that, I was like, oh, this is very masculine. It has a very masculine feel. How can we balance that out with the feminine? And so that's when I was like, you know what, we should put in some other like things that resonate with us as far as like the masculine and feminine traits. And also one thing that we're really trying to do is just make our business more heart-based. And our bottom line is our well-being as people who are working with the company. And so most, as we know, what we've been taught is the well-being or the bottom line is profit.
right. And actually, I want to talk about that. I would love if you could spend a little bit of time for maybe new listeners that may not necessarily understand the masculine and feminine dynamic. I know that we oftentimes throw those phrases out like, oh, it's masculine or it's feminine, and a lot of people, if they're not necessarily in tune with their own energies, they're like, what do you mean when you keep saying that's masculine? Or what do you mean when you keep saying you want to put more feminine into it? What does that actually mean? Because there's different dimensions of it. Because you have the physical material dimension of masculine and feminine, which is like, oh, male and female. But then again, we're also talking about something deeper, which is the energy that goes into whatever is being discussed, whatever dimension of reality we're discussing. And as that energy goes in, it materializes as masculine or feminine. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
spend a little bit of light on what masculine and feminine is in your opinion.
Yeah. There's definitely so many different definitions. For me personally, I like to make things as simple as possible. And the way that I've understood it and see it is that the masculine is this energy of more of the builder, the explorer. Let me cut the wood, bring the wood to the house, and I'll chop the wood. And the feminine to me is more of the receiver, more of that fluidity, the flow, and not so much the make a 1, 2, 3 plan, but more so just letting things come as they do. So I feel like the masculine is, yeah, more of like let's do A, B, C, and the feminine is just like, let's just be here.
So the masculine, if I hear you correctly, is the parts of our own logical mindset that uh,
Yeah, the mind, and then yeah.
goal oriented, wanting to do things logically, like you said, step one, step two, and step three, getting to the end goal.
Right.
Then you say feminine is more so about just kind of flowing with it,
And
and,
the heart space.
right, and feeling like, so the way that I kind of perceive, kind of piggybacking on this, is like, they're both trying to get to the same goal.
Right.
Both the masculine and the feminine are both trying to get to the same goal, and that goal is completion. Again, whatever that thing that we're choosing to put our focus on in those moments. So
Right.
I've come to realize that like the masculine and the feminine have different definitions of completion, but when they are put together, that's where I feel like they actually make true completion.
Yeah.
Because you have the masculine, which is focused on getting to the destination, and then you have the feminine, which is about making sure you feel good on the way to the destination. And so when you can feel good on the way to the destination while also making it to the destination, that's where I feel like you have true bliss and you have a true experience. And I think that's a great place to start talking about like a good starting point of looking at what it means to be a balanced being, or what it means to, to be a healthy human, and being able to actually have your masculine energy and your feminine energy equally balanced within each other. It's like there's these two beings inside of us that are married, and we're learning how to allow both of these energies to feel equally heard and to feel equally expressed. So when we're talking about masculine, we are talking about the logical mind. We're talking about the mind that is practical, the mind that takes things that we look at as visionary, or takes things that we look at as abstract, and it tries to bring those things into a very practical way of thinking and processing. And then on the flip side, we've got our feminine energy, which is our heartfelt energy, which is the energy that we feel or embody when things aren't necessarily making sense in the mind. Things aren't necessarily designed to make sense in the mind. A good example of this is like imagination. Imagination is very feminine energy, because we end up putting together these things, these images in our minds that we don't necessarily logically know how those things could be made real. We're simply choosing to create them and then ask ourselves, does it feel good? Does what I created in my mind feel good? It's like our childlike energy within us, our youngest self that said, hey, I don't care about coloring in the lines. I don't care about, whether or not the stick figure I drew has all isometric body limbs. I'm going to just draw something that feels good to me. And when I look back at it and I say, this feels good, this feels right, then I look at that as being complete.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I really love what you said about, kind of finding this harmony between the mind and the heart. And that's been one of my biggest missions for myself over the past couple of years. I saw the power of the mind and I felt the power of the heart. And observing, we know when we encounter someone, or even ourselves, when we're all in our mind, all mental energy, almost too rational, right? Too rigid, too structured. And then there's those who are too emotional, to letting emotions just run everything. And I saw this sweet spot in the middle. It's funny if you think about the actual like chakras. It's like your throat chakra. So even just like kind of voicing this out right now makes a lot of sense, as far as like the emotions are a tool, and our mind is also a tool. And together, like you were saying, is where the bliss is, the magic and the harmony is. Because I think some people are afraid of their emotions, and some people are afraid of their mind. It's like, no, they together work together.
Absolutely. And I think that's great, because I feel like, for a long period of time when it came to business, I think that people were afraid of bringing their emotions into business. And so it's like, that's been the reason why, the feminine energy was not allowed in business for hundreds of years.
Because that so much emotion can be a wave.
Right. Because this is the thing, is like, even as a business owner today, kind of taking that next step for us now, It's like, as a business owner today, there's very little room for, well, let me change my words, because I was about to say there's very little room for feminine energy in business for my life today, but which is true, but it's only true because of the timing of which I'm doing business, in the season of business that I'm doing in my life. And I think that's what we're learning how to do. We're learning how to realize that both the masculine and the feminine can be equally heard in business, but they're heard, or they're meant to be heard at different times of business. And that's what we're recognizing, is that one, that even within our own internal energies, both the masculine and the feminine can experience their own heaven in time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like we always ask ourselves, especially when we're in a dualistic consciousness of like, oh, am I going to be masculine, or am I going to be feminine? Or am I going to handle this in a very masculine way, or am I going to handle this in a more heartfelt, intuitive way? You know, and what we're realizing is that when we can combine both the intentions of our masculine and feminine both together in purpose, this was the key for me. It was like, instead of making it seem like it's my masculine versus my feminine, and they're both just trying to argue and try to figure out who's going to get the say so, it's like, what if we put a plan together that incorporates both masculine and the feminine, where they're both actually winning? And so in this plan, there are seasons where the masculine is taking the lead and the feminine is following. And then there's also seasons where the feminine is taking the lead and the masculine is following. And that kind of ties back to what I was saying in the beginning. For me personally, is like, you know, I'm in the season of starting like new business, where I'm securing business relationships with people. I'm putting together the basic foundation of my business. And this is the time, in my opinion, where the feminine is not needed.
Right.
And I say that because in the very beginning stages, and this is just my experience, but in the very beginning stages of building a business, there's so much structure that needs to be put into place.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much.
Right. Like you're building the skeleton of it. The bone.
Exactly, the bone. So it's like, it's kind of like, you're right, looking at our human body, and like, our human body has got masculine and feminine aspects to it. So there are things in our body that are designed to keep the structure. You know, like you said, our bones, you know, the way that we're structurally built, you know, our organs. But then you've got feminine characteristics like blood, which exist everywhere throughout the body, and they just circulate and it just flows. And through it flowing, it's doing its job. So it's like, what seasons, and being able to master the knowing of which seasons are best to integrate our masculine and feminine energy. So like I was saying, you know, that masculine trait, I think, is so important in the beginning, being able to be firm in what it is you're ready to begin, being able to be practical as far as, you know, understanding what resources you have to begin with, you know, being able to take accountability. Okay, I want to start this new business venture. Okay, how many people do I have in my life who are supporting this venture? How much money do I have to put towards this venture? How much time can I set aside a day to actually work on this venture? All of those things are masculine traits, in my opinion, that allow you to begin to see, okay, I have this vision that I created in my head. By the way, the vision of which I created is masculine, because it's feminine, because I didn't necessarily think about how that vision was going to take place. I just simply said, what?
Well, you receive that from source.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We receive the vision from source. And that's why, you know, that source is feminine. You know, that goddess is giving us that imagination that is really showing us why we're here. It's showing us our purpose. It's showing us how we perform when we are operating within our highest self.
You were pregnant. It was like you were pregnant with an idea. You got impregnated by source in a way.
I like,
you were receiving that.
I like that. I like that. Yeah. So it's like, you know, it's interesting. I said in the beginning that the masculine comes first, but if you're counting the actual idea that you're birthing into place, then technically the feminine comes first. Right?
That's true. That's true. And I wanted to share actually something, an example that seems very fitting for what we're talking about right now, as far as when to utilize more feminine and the masculine. And it actually, depending on how you want to look at the steps, like I do think that like the feminine and receiving the idea for the business or whatever project you want to do, that comes first, and it kind of makes sense with nature. But actually, what I wanted to talk about was at Beloved, where you and I kind of crossed paths because
Yeah.
I saw you briefly
Yeah.
um, at Beloved. So we were serving broth there, and that was like our first event ever. And the craziest thing is that 7 months before Beloved happened, I went onto their website, just looking, just perusing, curious about what Beloved was all about. And then I saw that they were taking application for vendors. Mind you, we just filed for LLC. We don't even have a product yet.
Wow.
And I was like, you know what? I was like, I didn't think we were gonna get it. So I was like, I'm gonna apply. Like, what do we have to lose? Like, why not? At that point, we just had a business plan and an idea of what we wanted to put forward. About 2 months before Beloved happened, the coordinator reached out to us and she's like, we have one spot left. We want you guys there. Can you do it? And I said yes. And that's when the masculine kicked in. And I was like, okay, we gotta start planning this shit.
Yeah.
And that's when we started, really planning and getting all of our ducks in order. But there was also a lot of intuitive still within that, like how much broth to bring, how much ingredients to bring. How do we set up our booth? How do we want to make it feel? So we were in and out of feminine masculine a lot with that. But once we got there, it was all masculine because it was all doing the job,
Wow. Yeah. I think that's great because like what you said just a moment ago of like how you were constantly in this masculine, feminine, it almost looks like this threading that you're putting together.
Yeah.
Or yeah, it's like you're weaving. And that's what I view in my mind when I look at the masculine and feminine in perfect harmony. Is like, imagine like a DNA strand, and like you have these two strands that are like constantly intertwining back and forth. It's like one of those strands is masculine and the other strand is feminine, and they're just like meeting at these roads. So it's like, like you said, you just said, hey, it would feel good if we had our own booth, at this festival that we're at, and that was your feminine. So you just sent the intention out there, and then universe responded with that, with your intention, with the counter intention of like, okay, let's see, so we have one slot left, do you want to be in that space? And you showed up and you said yes. And then the second you said yes, your feminine took the back seat now because she did her job. So now the masculine comes up and is like, okay, well, how do we actually going to get this done? Like, what is it? Like, what's the space? How much broth do we actually need? How much chicken, how much time is it going to take to make the broth? And you started getting into things that were more practical to help you manifest your true full vision.
Exactly.
So I think that is so huge because, again, as we're talking about masculine and feminine energies in business, it's like that's a telltale sign of what it looks like practically for the masculine and feminine to be on the same team and be working in tandem, with each other. And I think that if people could just understand that the masculine and feminine are supposed to work in tandem through different times and different seasons, one of the things that I was saying in the beginning where I was like, I just received a huge download about like why the feminine wasn't accepted so much in history prior to this point in time, like leading up into this point in history. And it's like I started thinking of like, we're just moving into a time where masculine men are learning how to integrate their feminine, and where feminine are learning how to become more masculine. So imagine times in history, say hundreds of years ago, where the integration phase wasn't necessarily taking place yet. And so all women knew how to be was feminine, and all men knew how to be was masculine. So if you're in this season of time or season of history where it's time, there are a lot of things you have to construct. Like imagine being at the primal stage of a civilization, right? So it's like, a bunch of people get together and they say, okay, it's time to start building something that our people and our children can actually, leave a legacy behind. It's like all of that is masculine energy work. And so before that time space where feminine were more integrated in their masculine, it's like, I can definitely see, and this is what I recognize even today in business, I definitely see where when the feminine tries to go into business without having a masculine, I can see how it's detrimental to business.
Yes.
100%. I've seen how my own masculine energies have become detrimental to business. I've seen, being in conversations with people and, people not respecting time. That was one of the biggest things that I recognized. There's a difference between the masculine and the feminine. The feminine, again, likes to flow, likes to just feel good, likes to show up whenever, and then respect the fact that whenever I show up is perfect. But the masculine energy is all about meeting deadlines and holding each other accountable for, each other's time, because our time is very valuable. So I saw times where my own feminine energy was causing me to step into a meeting late, thinking that, oh, at least I feel good going into the meeting because I was able to get everything done before I came into the meeting, but I'm also late now. So I'm also not respecting this person's time. And I'm not respecting the time that we gave for this particular meeting. So I started seeing these catch-22. And then, I started seeing times where, I was having conversation with people, but because I wasn't in my masculine, I was so easy to let the conversation just drift off topic. Like that was a big thing for me, is like getting really excited and getting really heartfelt about what I was saying, to the point where I stopped addressing the whole reason why we were holding the meeting to begin with.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that is flow. That is the flow. And that's the beauty of when the masculine and the feminine can weave together and be in tandem, is that I feel like you can even kind of like hack that in a way where you create the structure, like the boundaries for the river, as the masculine aspect of it, and then within that you can even have a little bit of flow and feminine energy within that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've learned that myself when it comes to, just slowing down a little bit and being able to have better communication in the beginning when it comes to setting your intentions. One of the things that we learned in one of my training courses that I took a few years back, on like how to manage over multiple groups of people, is like anytime you enter into a meeting with larger groups of people, the first thing you do is what they call set the agenda. And that's when you verbally speak on what's about to take place. So you speak and you say, okay, great. My intention of this meeting is to, help us all get on the same page about the new policies that are coming into place. I want to spend about 15 to 20 minutes first just checking in and seeing how everyone's doing. Then I want to move into talking about, the first 3 policies, get anyone's, perspective on that. Then we'll move into X, Y, and Z. And I recognize that when you do that and you're setting that, like that skeletal structure, that masculine structure in the beginning, it creates a more safe space for someone to play and be in their heartfelt space, because they know that they're only in that space for a certain period of time. But as long as they know that time period's in place, they can play safely and freely without having to feel like, oh, I'm not going to be heard in this time because, they're trying to move on to something else. It's like, no, I know exactly how much time I have to be able to be in this space and, truly base my responses off of how I'm feeling.
I love that so much. And just you describing that whole thing is just how powerful intention is. And I think how what it sounds like too, even in that scenario, and we've all, if we have business, we've all been in our own business meetings, like we know what it's like to go in without having an agenda versus having it. And I think when you state your intention, it feels like the masculine and the feminine communicating with each other in a way where you're expressing that. Like, I just love that visual of just having them be able to play within the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting because like I've even recognized this issue, and this is the reason why, even in my circles of like mastermind groups that I'm creating, I'm coming to this conclusion of this hypothesis that I think in every, like I've had men's groups, I think in every single men's group, there should be at least one female there. And vice versa. I think in every female group, there needs to be at least one strong masculine there, because there's so many times where I'm having mastermind meetings with men, and it's like our conversations will be so masculine that it's like someone will just state like, yeah, I tried doing this and this didn't work. And so now I'm trying to do this. And then someone's like, well, have you thought about doing this? And I thought about like, yeah. And so we get to this whole conversation, and then like, we haven't really questioned, like, how are you actually feeling about the decisions you're making?
Right.
Like,
good bro. Like,
yeah, like,
are you happy?
right. Are you happy? Are you like, you're trying to get to the destination, but like, the journey that you're on is clearly showing that you're not enjoying, the journey. So are you going to even enjoy the destination when you get there? You know?
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, you know, there have been times where I've observed, you know, female conversations, and that's where I feel the most called, because like a lot of those meetings happen where like women are trying to heal from something collectively, and it's like when it comes to their healing, they want to just feel like they're being heard all the time. So you have constant conversation about women who are just simply telling the stories about their pain, but they're not actually moving past it.
Right.
You know, they're just sitting there like, oh my God, we feel you, we hear you, thank you for sharing. And it's like, that's, I think, is a good time where the masculine is supposed to step in and say, okay, now what do you want to do now that you've experienced this? Like, what's your lesson that you're supposed to learn? How do you want to feel more empowered? And then how do you want to take that empowerment out to the world? You know, and that comes simply in just being able to ask the right questions at the right time. You know, if there was a female to come in to say, hey, that thing you just said, that plan you just made, how do you feel about that plan, bro?
Yeah. It's such a, I mean, it's such a stark difference when you're describing, like, you know, in the men's group, you know, just over logical, like so much logic thinking, like almost to the point of trying to already get to the solution. And then the feminine, you know, too much feminine is just they're stuck even before thinking about the steps. So it's like meeting in the middle of where those two converge. I actually have a really good example of how like I was way into my masculine for a little bit this past summer. Just you know, for me, it's really easy to get into these like work, these work. I almost want to say like trance,
Yeah.
like where I'm just
They
like
call them powwows these days, or like,
yeah,
where like you have a tunnel vision season of like work, 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 work.
work. And I was doing that this past summer, really in my masculine. And I think that's one thing that people also get blinded by in business too. Like even what we're saying right now is like sometimes even when we're building a structure and it keeps building and building, and then you get to the like maybe the last part of it and you recognize you never took a stop, you never stopped to breathe, and you didn't actually, you forgot the foundation. I don't know, you're just like so mesmerized by like the progress in the 3D. So this summer I was kind of in that space, and then I decided I needed to take a break, and I went camping with my mother, and I had no cell service. And so it was great. I was fully disconnected for like 5 days, and we were camping in Central Oregon. And so when I came back to service, you know, and then that's like me, I had to go into complete just rest, recover, receive. Like that's the mode I was in.
Complete feminine.
Complete feminine. And we were by a huge body of water. So like it just all flowed. And then when I came back to have cell service, I kid you not, there was like 3 or 4 huge opportunities in my email inbox, like that I wasn't expecting to get, but because I so drastically put myself in receiving mode,
Yeah.
universe was like, okay, so you're done pushing. We don't want to resist you anymore. We need to have some things flow to you. And that was a huge lesson for me. I was like, damn, I need to sit down sometimes.
Wow. Yeah, I want to ask you, like, how do you think that message can connect to like our country as a whole? Like, you know, we've got so much masculine energy that's running our country. And it's like, what do you think, it looks like for the feminine to come in and create that balance that we've all been looking for when it comes to just how we, you know, live our everyday lives and how our country is built and structured?
That's a great question. The first thing that comes to me right now is I truly don't feel that we're going to be able to rebuild if the feminine doesn't forgive the masculine.
That's interesting. I didn't expect you to say that.
Yeah, it's not, we don't think about it that much. And the reason I say that is because all of us have masculine, feminine inside of us. And we're just, the external obviously is just reflecting our internal. And I feel like
why do you think the feminine needs to forgive the masculine?
Well, in the 3D, you see a lot of like feminine, divine feminine rising to sort of movements, which have a purpose. And it's funny because that same energy in some regards can be matched to toxic masculinity because we're not looking at the whole, right?
Right.
And I feel like, in some iterations of the way our that we've existed and evolved as humans is that, I know the matriarchy used to be the one all be all, like, and then that just became unbalanced.
Mm-hmm.
Then the patriarchy came in. And so now it's finding that homeostasis, that balance between both. And it's just ever since, I had this women's group that I did a few years ago, and I was never one to be like, oh, divine feminine, like all the way. It's not, it just doesn't feel resonant to me. I see the masculine and I want to forgive the masculine, even though the masculine within myself and some that I've experienced, like, have caused me pain.
Right.
That's not the way for true freedom and true liberation as we move forward, because then we're just creating the same mess again.
Same thing all over again. That's how trauma works, right? It's like we experience something and then we say we don't want to experience it anymore. So we become the abuser,
Yeah.
to make sure that we're not the abusee, anymore. I think that's really key to touch on that. For me personally, I've been an individual that has been blessed to have a perspective that can see the entire process, to see, I'm an alchemist. So everything that we view is neutrally. So, as an alchemist, we see the process of everything. So when we can look back through history and we can observe the times where the matriarchy was solely in rule. A lot of people don't even have time to even see this aspect of it, unless you access it akashically. But it's like people can't see the time where the feminine energy was dominant on the planet, where it didn't necessarily, we didn't necessarily care about how it was going to get done. We just had an infinite amount of resources to do something and to do anything. So in those times, the people who had the most imagination, the people who had the biggest ability to feel like, how can I connect to what feels good? Because when we can connect to what feels good, I can connect to why I'm here. Like, I personally believe that our purpose is connected to the best possible feeling we can create inside of us. So when you're more in tune with your feelings, you can connect to the higher visions more efficiently than someone who is only focused on how that vision is going to be executed. So we have a whole season where that feminine energy was designed to rule, where it's like, let's just get all the ideas on the whiteboard.
Yeah.
And so during that time, we had that matriarchal rule. Then in history, there's knowledge that's pretty much communicates that the feminine energy got into her ego, where she was like, oh, I'm the one calling the shots. This is all because of me. So, you guys aren't really anything. So that's when the masculine began to take its rise, where it's like, okay, well, if you're saying that you guys are better than us, then this, and this is why I even say the same issue. This is a big conversation we're about to dive into, because we're about to figure out why the feminine has been suppressed for so long, and why the feminine has actually just been receiving her own karma that she sent out. That's why the Black woman is the most suppressed woman on the planet. And it's like, why is that happening? Where's her karma in that loop and what she's receiving back? And it's like, a lot of people haven't done enough history to see the time where the Black woman mentality consumed our entire planet, where it's like, when you become so believing in the fact that you created everything and that you had the power to create everything, and that men, their only job was to add structure to what was already in creation.
And that I just quickly want to note is, like, we're seeing that same approach in a lot of feminine rising.
We're seeing the same exactly. Even when you look at how the dynamic of a household, it's like, the female is actually the one doing all the work as far as holding the structure together for most households today. So it's like, we're seeing that the true core of grounding energy started off being in a feminine energy space. But what I will say is that the shadow side of that is that in the beginning, the female energy didn't know how to lead. They didn't know how to communicate to the masculine. They just spoke in an absolute I'm the goddess mentality, which then end up creating and cultivating the ego within the masculine. So now the masculine was like, well, fuck that. I'm gonna try to do my own thing. Matter of fact, we're
I
bigger.
don't need you.
Right. We're bigger than you.
Yep.
Our voices are louder than you. So
Yep.
it's like now they began to physically move in on the feminine, and they began to physically suppress the feminine. You know, so now that's where the feminine had to start receiving her karma of like, okay, I saw what happens when I don't, and when I don't make the masculine feel like it's empowered, then the masculine will physically empower over me. So they will physically put me into slavery to the point where I can't speak out, where I can't have a voice. And that's what we've been experiencing in history this entire time, you know? So now what we're seeing is the final calibration process.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know,
I believe that.
like, oh, there's water in a bottle, and that water has been going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And now we're in this season where we're finding this equilibrium balance. And it's like, okay, what happens when the female steps back into her power, recognizes that she has the ability to birth worlds, but also recognizes that it's her job to empower the masculine. It's her job to make the man feel like it's the one running things. And that's the crazy thing is like women, like the way that women are coming back into power today is the same way women have been trying to come back into power throughout history. It's not even trying to come back into power. It's more so just trying to be heard.
Yeah.
You know, when you're in a society where where you're dominated physically, where if whoever has the loudest voice has the most, you know, say so, or whoever has the most muscle has the most say so, it's like what that does is this is like the beginning process of activating the feminine's superpowers.
Yeah.
Right. So as an alchemist, let's go back to the beginning, and I want to make sure I break this down extremely slow so we can see this entire process. The first process started off with the feminine being in her light. That is where she's in her highest form, the creation form, the birthing of just things. The population of our planet is all feminine energy. But then you have the shadow side of that, where that she gets prideful because of that. So because of that pridefulness, you know, it caused a separation between the feminine and the masculine. So then the masculine has a season where it takes rule for thousands of years, where all it's doing is suppressing the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
But in the process of suppressing the feminine is now learning new superpowers. Because now the feminine is recognizing, oh, I don't have a voice anymore. I can't just speak my truth anymore. So I have to find a more unique way to speak my truth. So I have to be a little bit more seductive. I've got to be a little bit more strategic.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, you know, if he's not going to listen to me at all when he's in masculine state, you know, maybe I'll give him a little pussy, and all of a sudden I can whisper in his ear everything I want him to do, and he's like, oh man, that's a really good idea. You know, women learned the power of the bedroom. They learned like, oh man, I figured out that if I can, you know, give him, if I can stroke his ego enough,
Yeah.
and make him feel empowered, he will do everything that I tell him to do, and he'll want to do it. It won't even be much of a conversation.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, this whole time has been about women learning how to find their true power.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not just about telling the man that he's wrong, not just about telling the man that he's stupid, tell him that he's not doing anything, because they've already experienced the karma of what happens when they do that. Women are right about 99% of the things, but if you don't know how to communicate how right you are,
how good is it
you'll be wrong.
I want to add to with this whole, I love how you laid that out and what it was making me think about, at least in my experience, being more feminine forward. And I just want to share this with anyone's listening as far as some advice that I would love to give out is, with one thing that I've noticed is that as I've gone through this journey of building a business, the way I speak, the tone of my voice, usually females are really up here, like really high, like, hi, like, oh, I want to build this business, I think, you know? But then you like speak down from your root chakra. And then when you do that, especially around other males, they see you're serious, because when you're up here in your head and you're like in your crown chakra, you're so like cosmic. But then when you're down in your root chakra, you're here on the earth plane building, cutting the wood, you know? And I've noticed how much just when I'm not confident, I'll go up and talk lighter. But when I'm confident, I'll go back down to my
Yeah,
solar
you
plexus, to my
stop
root.
giving a fuck when you know you're right. You're like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's what it is. Take it or leave
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So I just wanted to share that because you mentioned a lot about speaking your truth, being in your power. And I think one thing as females, and sound frequency is really powerful. Like,
Mm.
just practice that, like, or just start to witness yourself in certain situations. A lot of people I know, especially in this age in your 20s, when you're trying to break away from your family, not break away, but like become more independent. When you go with your parents, you start to talk like a child again.
Mm.
That
Interesting.
higher voice.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to think about because it all, plays a part within how we show up.
Absolutely. And I would even piggyback on that and like say that even when it comes to me as a masculine and how I relate to females, is that when I recognize that when I start getting upset about something, you know, because my voice naturally carries, it's naturally loud, as a Black man, it's like I found that, learning how to increase the pitch of my voice at times creates a
Mhm.
more subtle way to deliver my message to
Mhm.
even the feminine when I'm being extremely passionate about a certain topic. So like I think
Yeah,
a
they both
lot of
play
men,
together.
yes, yes, absolutely. I think if a lot of men learn how to access that softer tone and that heartfelt tone where it's like, okay, it's not about necessarily screaming the words that I need her to hear, even if those words are correct. It's more so about making sure she understands where I'm emotionally coming from and why I'm so passionate about what I'm saying. So, sometimes when we could just get in a high pitched voice in our little kid self, it's so much easier to just deliver that message without it seeming like you're trying to be condescending or you're trying to, really checkmate somebody. It's like,
Right.
I've learned the best way to win a war is to not let the person think that a war is even going on.
Right.
And when we can help people remember that we're on the same team, even when and the same thing vice versa. Like there are so many times where like your love and light voice is the reason why I don't feel like I'm being heard. So like if you can come down into a deeper voice and be real with me, then I would appreciate that so much more than you giving me the emotional runaround. And that's where I think a lot of men are. So like you said before, finding that balance is the key to self-mastery.
Yes. Yeah, and discernment of when to go into those different energy spaces.
Yeah, we're coming up on our last 5 minutes here, but I would love to have another chat with you where we
Sure.
can start talking
Yeah.
about like the when it's the most beneficial to be in our feminine and when it's the most beneficial to be in our masculine when it comes to business.
Yes. Yeah.
I've we talked about it very briefly, but I'm glad we were able to just express and the masculine and feminine in general today, because it really sheds light on the time that we're moving into. Just by us having this conversation of like being able to consider the masculine and feminine as equals, but equals on all dimensions of reality. Like we see how we're learning how to become equal when it comes to the physical masculine and feminine bodies of male and female bodies, but then we're also learning how to respect the parts of us that are practical and the parts of us that are visionary and heartfelt. And then we're also even on a form before that, it's like we're learning how to focus on the parts of our life that create structure versus the parts of us in our life that create freedom. So those are three different dimensions of masculine and feminine energy, that we're learning how to get into proper alignment so that we can create our heaven on earth internally and externally.
Mhm.
So I would love to have another chat with you. Maybe we can make this a part one and then have a part two of masculine versus feminine in business, because this was awesome.
Yes, I love that. Thank you.
My pleasure. So, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, Jenny Affen, one of the most conscious women that I
Yes,
personally
thank you.
have in my life. And I've been so blessed to just have her as a friend to bounce my masculine ideas off and know that I'm going to get an equally reciprocated, pure and divine feminine, input that can help our, co-creative output. So I'm extremely grateful for you coming and having the time today to chat with us. Thank you for just being able to be that voice for my listeners. I know they enjoy everything. If you want to, please shout out your social media or where people can find you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. First, I just want to say thank you, Enki, so much for having me on your platform and facilitating this. So honored and so grateful that we're in a time where we can meet on Zoom and have this conversation. It's just so magical.
Fourth dimensional.
And then we can share this. So thank you so much. And my Instagram is cosmic, COSMIK _rainbow. And I also just want to shout out that on December 21st, I will be in Mexico City having a quantum ceremony with 3 other lovely women. And please go to my Instagram and check out the information. We're inviting anyone who feels called.
Totally forgot about that. So you hold ceremonies and workshops today, right?
Yes, so it's quantumconnectionsource.com. And so Imani and I have created a platform for people to come and learn about quantum and how it relates to actuality, like in the human form, not just atoms. So we're currently doing that, and we're going to Mexico City to do some portal activation, slight work.
That is awesome. Slight work, light work. I so would love to dive more into that with you and like really have you open that whole thing up and really explain what the quantum field and what the quantum world is even all about and how that relates to masculine and feminine energies and just to our self-mastery journey. So I definitely look forward to, having more time with you on our show. That concludes our show for today. For those of you guys who are just tuning in or just catching this first podcast, we have a podcast every single Wednesday with Ascension Time with Enki, where we dive into all things higher consciousness as we are moving into this new paradigm. So I love you guys. I like you guys. I like you all. Tune in next week. Peace.